Hey everybody, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Beekeeping for Newbies. Thank you so very much for taking the time to listen. I do appreciate you. And as always, feel free to reach out. It's Jeff at beekeepingfornewbies.com. That's NEWBEES.com. Well, folks, here we are. I think it's relatively safe to say, at least where I am and some of the surrounding areas, that spring is sort of here. I'd like to say that it's here, but we had 87 degrees the other day. And then the next day we had a mix of snow and whatever else was going on with that. And I think that my phone said 36 degrees. That would be, of course, Fahrenheit. So that's probably like 2 or 3 Celsius. That's the one measurement, by the way, that I seem to be able to figure out. If it's really close to freezing, I can kind of get that that's about 0 on the Celsius scale. Anyway, today we're going to talk about something that is going to be applicable, I would say, primarily to your new beekeepers, not necessarily year one. I mean, you could be maybe 2 or 3 years in, because as with anything that you do, and this is one of those things that always takes me back to the Army, you know, we did things repetitively, like over and over and over again, to create muscle memory so that your brain doesn't have to consciously think about how to do something that's really, really important under a high stress situation. Now you think, Jeff, we're talking about beekeeping, man. We're not, doing some kind of a raid or an assault on a building or something like that. That's very true. But when you're doing an inspection, or when you're really into something with the bees and there's a little bit of chaos, every now and then you drop a hive body, you drop a frame, bees are coming out of everywhere, they're not super pleased with you. That's the time when you have some of these kind of things already taken care of, already ready to go for you, already positioned. Now, we're not kind of going super deep like on the inspection side, but we do have a dedicated episode coming up in a couple of days for that. It's within the next couple of weeks. We're going to talk about some inspection details. But what happens is, every season you start to recognize, okay, it's just about bee season. I guess I need to start getting things ready. For year one, you have no idea. You're just like, I got to get a whole bunch of stuff and hopefully I get everything ready and have what I need. Year two, then it becomes, where did I put all the stuff that I need? And then remembering it all. I tell you, man, it has to be the first, 4 years, 5 years maybe, in, doing this every year for 4 or 5 years. And I would still go out to do an inspection and be like, why is my hive tool not in my little bag that I carry? So then I got to go get the hive tool. And then I come back and I'm doing something. I'm like, I'm holding a queen, reaching in my bag. And why do I not have my queen marker? Like stupid things, goofy things like that. So what I want to do is, we're not going to solve that necessarily today, but what I'm hoping to do is to just maybe give you a checklist of things, and you can print it out, you can save it as a PDF, you can come back and listen to it later, like whatever you want to do, just to kind of give you some ideas of things you need to be considering, whether you're a first year and, a couple years in. Now, the first thing I want to start with, and this is always, I think this was beat into my head, back in the old EMS days, but you got to take care of number one. You got to always be taking care of you. And the best way to make sure you're taking care of you is through your own well-being, your own mindset, your own protective gear, like all of these things. As I've said many times, the more comfortable you become with beekeeping, the greater the likelihood that you're going to start peeling off some layers. You're going to say, hey, I don't need the big, heavy full suit. I think I'm just going to wear jeans and the jacket with the veil, but I'm still going to do my gloves. And then maybe a little bit later you say, well, I'm going to go to the nitrile gloves. And you realize, hey, this is still working pretty well and I'm not really getting stung that much. And if you are, you look at the trade-off between the dexterity of the nitrile or barehanded versus the gloves, and you realize, like, yeah, it kind of stinks to get stung in the hand, but man, you can feel every little piece of the frame and you can feel a little bee move under your fingers without squishing it. Makes a big difference. But I don't want to run off on a tangent here. So you start peeling off various layers and you'll get to a point where your spring gear might only be just maybe just a veil. You might just wear jeans and a flannel shirt in the spring and have your veil, or you may just say, veil and t-shirt with the pair of overalls or whatever. You're going to find what works for you. And while we're on this subject, I want to tell you something that is incredibly important. I have heard rumors about this as long as I've been in beekeeping. So we're talking like 15 years. I have heard people say that their bee club or their mentor or somebody has said something like, well, you can't pass our whatever, like whether it's like an eligibility to attend a class, or whether it's to become an apprentice, or whether it's to become anything. You can't pass this unless you can do an inspection without any gloves. So ignore people like that. If you hear people that are telling you that, if they're telling you like this is the only way that you can do it, in my opinion, leave those people, smile nice and pretty and big and be like, okay, well, thank you for that. That's really good input. And then go somewhere else. Because the goal is for you to have, and again, you're not a commercial person. I'm not talking about somebody in the commercial field. I'm not talking about anybody who does it for a living. I'm talking you as an individual trying to enjoy beekeeping at your home, at your leisure. You wear gloves if you want to wear gloves. You don't want to wear gloves, don't wear gloves. But the number one thing is your personal safety and what makes you feel good. If you are stressed out that you're going to get stung, you're not going to enjoy beekeeping. You're not going to have a good experience. They make gloves for a reason. Like, when do you ever see big commercial entities moving lots of bees around and stuff, and they don't have the big goofy gloves on? That's very different from when you see experienced beekeepers working in their yard. You know, I still love Randy Oliver, dude. The guy is so funny. He'll be in his yard like t-shirt, like no shirt. He'll be in his yard like shorts, no shirt, and just doing his inspections and everything is cool. I mean, I'm sure he's getting stung every now and then, but it's not a big deal. It's not, you know, as long as they're not getting in the face and stuff, it's kind of not really the end of the world. But again, when you're calm and you're gentle and you're doing things in a very methodical way and you're not creating a lot of chaos, you can do those things. But the whole point I'm getting at with this is one of the really, really cool things about beekeeping is it allows people to think for themselves and to explore things in a way that's right for them. And if you hear somebody say something that just makes you kind of feel like, well, that doesn't seem right, go with your instinct across the board. Go with your instinct. Ask multiple people. You might hear me say something. This is another sidebar tangent because I can't stay on task to save my life. But I was going through my own material. I was trying to clean things up and get transcripts so I can organize things better and have an understanding of what's been covered and what hasn't. I have a list of things I've said where I've been like, what was I thinking? What did I even mean by that? So question things, ask questions, and if it doesn't feel right, don't do it. So you've got to take care of you. You are number one. Make sure that you are protecting yourself. Another thing that is in line with that, now this is one that people can debate. I kind of think there is some truth to it. I like it. It doesn't matter really in the grand scheme of things, but I do think that bees kind of feel your energy. I think if you go out there and you're working the bees and you're angry and you're irritable, you had a bad day, like I just feel like, think about how in tune they are to pheromones and scents. And it's like a dog. You know, somebody comes into a house and they're kind of a shady guy and the dog doesn't like him because the dog can smell that angst, that desire for that person to do harm kind of thing. It's the same sort of thing, in my opinion, with the bees. I haven't scientifically studied it, so don't beat me up if you have. But I think that your bees will feed off of your mood and the way that you carry yourself. So be calm, be relaxed, nice and slow. You know, just take your time. You're not trying to, you know, solve any kind of crisis here with your little inspection. Just relax. Now, another thing I want to tell you about, and this is really important, and it's something that people have gotten a lot better about. Like when I was a kid, I think that the only thing that we drank was like, I don't know, like Kool-Aid. They had the Ovaltine commercials and stuff like that, but it was like Kool-Aid and soda and, sweet tea. We always had a big jug of sweet tea in the house in the fridge. We had an iced tea maker, and I was cranking out like full, whatever it is, 2-quart, you know, things of iced tea 3 or 4 times a week. And of course, it was loaded with sugar, man. It was like boom, boom, just cup after cup of sugar. That's just good old Southern living. But that's all we drank. And I wonder, you know, like, why did we have headaches as kids and stuff like that? Or why, after being outside for like 10 hours in the summertime, did you feel all lightheaded and, you know, have a headache and everything? Because we weren't hydrated. We weren't drinking water. And today it is so much more available. You know, everybody now has like a hydro flask or some type of water carrying element component attached to their body at all times. Like you just see people walking around now, like phone in one hand, keys and water bottle in the other. And that's just kind of, you know, a normal thing. Make sure you're drinking plenty of water. It is really easy to dehydrate, even if you've shed off a lot of layers and you're just outside in maybe a veil and a, you know, a light, I like to wear those fishing shirts sometimes when I'm doing an inspection. If I'm just going with the veil, just for the UV protection. So that's something to consider if you get to the point where you're kind of veil only. You still want to protect your body from getting too much UV. Obviously, you need to get that vitamin D, but too much UV can have you getting a little crispy in the bee yard. Anyway, even with lighter clothes and everything, it's still really easy to dehydrate out there in the heat, especially as we get older. I mean, I look back to like my 20s and 30s. I could just be outside for 10, 11 hours, 95 degrees, 90% humidity down in southeast Georgia. We would be outside all day, like literally covered head to toe with all of our stuff, walking around, like just doing whatever we had to do. I have no idea how we survived that. I would do like an hour of that now, and I would pass out, have to call 411. All right, so let's talk about the actual gear that you're going to want to make sure you have. So we talked about the suit and the jacket, gloves or not if you're a glove person. Get your smoker ready, and we've talked about different types of smokers, I think, in the past. It doesn't matter what you get. You can buy the cheap little Amazon ones for $16, $18, whatever they are. I think they're probably $40 now because everything's doubled and tripled in price over the past few years. But I still like this one that I got years ago from Man Lake. And it's got a bellows. The part that you squeeze is the bellows. And it's got like a really heavy grade material that is a blue and a yellow color. And it's just it's a nice tall smoker. And I really like that one. I've had that probably for a decade now. And it works as well and looks as good today as it did when I first bought it. A lot of those cheaper ones, they're going to have a really lightweight wood that comprises the bellows. And I leave mine either in the garage. Sometimes they end up in a toolbox in the back of a truck. Sometimes they end up rolling around the back of the truck. Sometimes they end up sitting in the bee yard somewhere. If they get a little bit wet and some exposure to the elements, they will kind of fall apart a little bit quicker. But you can definitely use a cheap one just to get by. The thing you really want to pay attention to is at the very bottom of the bellows, there is an opening. That opening is pointing directly to the base of the smoker itself. You need to make sure that that is always free of debris and that you are, in fact, pushing air through there. So test the smoker first to make sure that with the lid open, you're seeing some debris or some ash from a previous smoker lighting. You see things moving around, or you can just kind of, hear the poof poof of the air. Just test the smoker here early in the season so you're not getting there on day one and saying, oh crap, my smoker's not working. Now, as far as smoker fuel goes, the big focus with smoker fuel, I'm not going to go ahead and tell you all the things that you can use. I want to tell you some of the things you just kind of want to avoid. Avoid anything that has a lot of like stickers and labels and plastics on it. So if you wanted to use, like a lot of people like to use a little bit of cardboard. Okay, cool. Use a little bit of cardboard, but don't have like your shipping label on it. I mean, make sure you're peeling off anything that could become toxic when heated, towards your bees because you're blowing it on the bees. They're like wood stove wood pellets. I used to have a wood stove. I absolutely loved it. And those pellets, I've heard a lot of people say that those are really good for kind of keeping your smoker lit, while you're working. I can't speak to it. What I can say is make sure that you're using something that is absolutely 100% does not have chemicals and things in it. Now, those are meant to be burned in a home, so I'm pretty sure they're probably okay. But just be mindful of that. I just go into the yard and I look for things that are dry, and I usually end up taking a bag at some point and throwing a bunch of stuff kind of in the bag and just leaving it in the bee yard, just a plastic bag that I reach into every now and then and make sure I have something in case it rained. But I'll use a little bit of pine needle, mostly just leaves. There's always some kind of grasses around. You do want to have a little bit of a mix, and I always tell people to go back to like the campfire. When you start a campfire, you start with small kindling and get things going. You put a few bigger pieces in there. And then after a while, you kind of don't even have to do anything because you have these coals that are there. It's sort of like that. Now, you don't want it to get really, really hot. A real hot fire is not what you're going for. But you do want to have a couple of things in there that will become coals that will slow burn and kind of slow burn the material around them. So I think we've got different videos and things that talk about smokers in detail in another area. But again, get your smoker and your smoker fuel ready to go. Hive tools. If you're going to buy them, you can go on, Alibaba or AliExpress or whatever it is. And if you wanted to buy a bunch of them for the bee club, they're about $1 a piece, and you can buy them, in bulk or whatever. If you can get them in bulk, that's kind of the way to do it. You might have to wait 3 or 4 weeks for them. You can get them on Amazon. I've got them linked through some of my affiliate links and stuff like that. If you go to Amazon, they're usually about $7 or $8 a piece. I would definitely recommend buying a 2, 3, 4, 5 pack because one, if you buy like a 5 pack, you're probably going to get them for like $3 or $4 a piece maybe. and you will use them. There's going to be a situation where either you're going to need it, a friend's going to need it, neighbor's going to need it. Maybe you have somebody helping you. You are going to lose them unless you're far more organized than me. I'm pretty confident that I have about 20 of them, and I wish that was a joke. I don't. I have all types. I've got yellow, red, blue, and then I have all the different types of, endings of them. Some of them just have the 90 degree with the flat on the opposite side. I did buy the J-hook style, which if you haven't seen it, it has a regular Hive tool flat end on one side that you would use to separate boxes and things like that. The other side has like a J, like the letter J. And it's a pretty cool Hive tool. I do like it. I've cautioned people about using it because it's really important that when you're doing an inspection that you're regularly removing or at least moving the frames around a little bit, because the bees are going to propolis. And when I say propolis, if you're a new beekeeper and like, what in the world does that mean? Propolis is that really sticky substance that's found inside the hive that bees use to seal up every crack, crevice, corner. They use it to protect them from anything that's in there that for whatever reason they may not be able to remove it, or if it's something that could possibly be a vector for infection or illness, they're going to cover it up with this propolis to kind of entomb it. Like if you had a dead bug of some sort that they couldn't remove. Or I've seen some interesting images of propolized mice where a mouse came in to establish a home in the wintertime and the bees literally propolized the whole mouse. It's pretty crazy what they can do. But they are going to make everything inside that hive sticky. Some, different genetics and different races of bees and everything are going to create more or less propolis depending on their genetics and how they operate. But if you always just leave the frames in place, they're going to kind of continue to layer this on, and it makes it incredibly difficult to remove these frames because you're always going to, insert the hive tool and move kind of side to side. You're trying to loosen things up. If you don't do the loosening first, as I learned in my probably first year of beekeeping, and you slide the J-hook underneath, because that's what it's designed for. It's designed to lift up the frame and pop it up to make it easier for you to grab. Great idea. But I just stuck it under there, pushed down, and literally ripped the top bar off of the frame. That is not a good idea. So just be mindful and be aware that you need to make sure that you are getting the frame loosened side by side or side to side before you take the old J-style hive tool and try to lift that up. All right, the next thing is lighters. I use a little propane torch. I'm really happy with that. But if you don't have that, you can still use a lighter, a regular, anything that makes a flame will still absolutely work fine. I do recommend the ones that you would use for like candle lighting in the house or maybe grill lighting, where it has the handheld trigger. You kind of get the trigger finger there and the extended end of it that goes out about 4 or 5 inches. I definitely recommend using something like that. It just keeps your hands away from the flame a little bit, and it just makes it a little bit safer overall. But whatever you have, use what you got. All right, now we're going to move into actual hive equipment. Now, we have an entire episode coming up, which is the next episode dedicated to picking out your hive equipment and what you're going to need. So we're going to go high level here. Make sure that if you had gear last year, I want you to go through and check all the old gear. And what you're looking for is areas where maybe there's a crack, or maybe, from where you are using the hive tool, sometimes the corners have gotten a little bit rough. If there are any cracks or openings, or maybe there's a knot, like a knot, just a natural knot in the wood, and maybe for some reason it's coming out a little bit, and there's some exposed area where it's starting to open up and you can see maybe a little bit into the hive, or there's an issue with that. You want to go after those things. So you can do a little bit of some wood putty, especially if it's on the outside. It's really easy, sand it down a little bit, put some wood filler in there, and just let that dry, and then sand it down, and then paint over that, and you won't have to worry about that for a while. Whatever types of frames you're using, get all of your frames prepped. Make sure that you've got enough for everything that you are putting on or putting into service at the beginning of the season. And I would go ahead and plan ahead. So let's just make this up and say whether you're brand new or whether you're an experienced beekeeper, you're set up a new hive for this season. You want to be ready for 2 deeps and a medium. Go ahead and do like 3 deeps and maybe 2 or 3 mediums, because that way when it's May and you're going, oh crap, I need another medium, or something happens and you're like, this colony is just out of control, I've got to split them again. You've got that stuff ready. Bottom boards, lids, all those things. Now, one thing I will tell you, a lot of people feel like they've seen the Beekeeping for Dummies. They've seen a lot of people on YouTube and different places, which, by the way, thank you so much for all of you who have been on the YouTube channel lately. We've had a tremendous amount of growth over the past couple of months. I appreciate you all coming there. It's just youtube.com/@beekeeping for newbies. Anyway, a lot of people you're going to see on YouTube, they always have like the migratory cover, and you always see the telescoping outer cover. Those are what you're kind of always going to see on the outside. And then when they open the hive, probably about 90% of them have a regular wooden inner cover. I want you to know that you don't have to use wood. And I've got this canvas I will add it to my ever-growing list of videos to do, but it's just a duck canvas I have. I bought a big spool of this canvas, and it makes it really, really easy to just kind of on the fly custom make a inner cover. So you're not going to need to worry if for some reason you do a split and something happens. Or like I had a season where I had, during the winter, the inner cover got really, really wet and was completely saturated, and it kind of messed it up a little bit. You can just cut from a material. There are people who use varying material, grain bags and any types of canvas like I was describing. You can use something other than a wooden cover. So having something on hand that doesn't take up space, like I have this spool that it lays in the corner of my garage. So it stands up in the corner, and I could probably make right now 100 inner covers from that spool. Imagine if I had to go out in my garage or my bee shed, and I had to have like 100 inner covers sitting there with like, we have palmetto bugs, aka cockroaches, that like love to get into nooks and crannies. If I had those in my garage, it would be a cockroach breeding ground. It would be absolutely disgusting. Just something to kind of consider as an alternative for the inner cover. But get all of that physical gear ready. New gear and old gear alike. Check the painting. I still have hive bodies and things from my first year of beekeeping that's in service today. And I've only repainted some of it maybe once or twice. I have some pieces that I have not repainted from the first season, and they are still doing great. Now, that was back in the old days where we like literally hand painted with brushes. So it was probably a little thicker than it is now with the power painter that we use, but make sure you're protecting that woodware. It will last a really long time if you do. All right, I want you to start thinking about a feeding plan. Now, feeding is something that you may or may not have to do depending on where you are. At this time of year, we're not talking so much about, and it's not that you can't do it. I'm telling you what I do and what I like. I'm generally not a huge pollen patty user anyway, but this to me is really not necessarily the time of year that pollen patty is kind of your go-to. You've got plenty of nectar and pollen that is coming in with your spring flow whenever that's going to kick in. But the feeding that I want you to be thinking about right now is particularly for a couple of scenarios. Scenario number one, you get a package of bees. I strongly encourage you to put some kind of a feeder in with that package of bees. So you can take your package of bees, put a single frame feeder inside of a nuc, put the bees in that 4-frame nuc, or a 5-frame nuc with 4 frames available for the bees. Let them work on that, and probably within no more than 2 weeks, you're moving them into a full-size, 8 or 10-frame Langstroth or whatever you've selected. If you're moving them immediately into an 8 or 10-frame Langstroth hive, consider maybe a top feeder, or again, you can still do a frame feeder. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But just be thinking of a plan that you can provide a supplemental feed to those packages, because all it takes is a couple of days of some bad weather, and it can be really, really disruptive to their growth, and it can be tragic if things get too bad. Lots of feeder options, and again, we have an episode coming up. It's like 4 episodes from now talking all about feeding. But I just want you to start thinking now about having a good feeding plan in place, because your feeder is something that you're going to use, I would say, at least 3 times a year. You'll probably use them a little bit in the spring to get some colonies that overwinter, to give them a little bit of a boost if necessary. You'll use it for your package bees. You may even need to use it for a nuc. If for some reason you've got a nuc and then you had 3 or 4 days of some more cold weather like we just had, they may burn through some of their stored resources. They may only have 1 frame of honey in there that they're pulling from, and they may have used a lot of it. Let's go ahead and just drop a frame feeder in, give them something that they can have to keep them moving forward and raising new brood and ramping up for the spring. And then, of course, if you have any kind of a dearth or anything that takes place in that season, if you're doing splits in the season, there's a lot of scenarios where you may need to feed. So just start thinking about that. And we're going to cover, like I said, we'll cover, 15 different feeders in the feeding episode that's coming up. So don't worry if you don't know exactly which ones to be looking for or thinking about. The other thing I want you to think about now is shifting away from the stuff and then just, like your mental plan. I want you to start considering the time commitment and the things that you're going to need to be doing in that first month. And I think it's going to be, tentatively, it's episode 199, inspection strategies for the first year. But what I want you to start thinking about is recognizing, all right, I'm a new beekeeper. Everything I'm doing is brand new. So let me get my checklist, right? Here's all the things I need to make sure I'm looking for. And there's nothing wrong with bringing a 3x5 card, or get a clipboard and bring that with you on your inspection with a couple of notes in there. I want to make sure I'm looking for capped brood. I want to look for maybe the presence of drones. Do we have any drones at this time of year? Do I see open cells that have these little worm-looking things in them? That would be developing larvae. If I see open cells that have a grain of rice in there, you're not growing rice. You're actually getting ready to raise new bees. Those are eggs. They just look like a little small grain of rice. If you can see the queen, that's a big bonus. But if you see the eggs, she's been there within the past 24 hours. You need to start thinking about what are the indicators of when you need to add space. How are you going to add the space? Because that's equally as important. And then make sure you have a schedule. We've talked about this quite a bit in the past, but it only takes 16 days to go from an egg to a new queen. The only real scenario that you hopefully will be seeing any potential for a new queen, as long as everything is going well, would be a swarming condition. If they are preparing to swarm, that queen cell is going to be capped around day 8 or 9 in that time frame. And once that happens, that's kind of like the go sign for the colony. Okay, you have been cleared for takeoff. You can now start making swarm plans. Now, there's a little bit more to it than that. And I would say, realistically, anytime that swarm cell is capped, it could happen. I would say your likelihood really increases as you get closer to that day 16. But realistically, probably between days 12 to 14 in there are probably the most common. If you saw like a bell curve, the middle of that bell curve is probably like right around day 12 or 13, something like that. So you have to be really aggressive with that. You need to be making sure to do inspections every week. If you know that you're, for some reason you're going on vacation, you got somebody's graduation you got to go to in another state, or there's something going on that is taking you away on that weekend, and you're going to have a 2-week gap between inspections. Add a little bit of extra space early. So you're going to do your inspection that is your last inspection before you go wherever you're going to go. Make sure that if you have queen cups in there, I would be pinching queen cups. I would be eliminating queen cells, making sure there are no cells present anywhere, and give them extra space in the form of a wax foundation or drawn comb or something like right in the middle of that brood space to make sure they know you have space, you need to use it, here it is. And hopefully that will slow things down a little bit. But start thinking about all the things you need to look for. Join us in the Discord room and say, hi, I'm new. What do I need to look for? I'm sure I've probably got it somewhere where I can just copy and paste it in there, but there's a bunch of people in there who are really supportive and quite helpful. And you can get an answer for that. Now, the next thing is probably something that truthfully is going to be the most important thing, and it is hands down, without a doubt, the most overlooked and ignored thing in beekeeping, at least for new beekeepers, because I am guilty party number one. You have to have a varroa plan. If you said to me, I don't know, Jeff, I'm on the fence. Like, do I buy a extra nuke so that I can have 2 colonies, or should I just get one and buy a varroa treatment? I would say just get one. No matter what you do, you have to have a varroa plan. Now, there are people who are going to tell you, I don't treat for varroa. I don't do anything. Now, I think that there are 2 sides to that. There are 2 approaches that would involve that statement. And there might even be 3, depending on how far you want to go with it. One of them is, I want to be all natural, and I just let nature take its course and let nature do its thing, and the bees manage to survive just fine in nature without treatment, so I'm not going to treat my bees either. I love that. I think that's really cool, and I really think that that is the way that we would all like to be. But anybody who's been beekeeping for more than about 3 or 4 months already has figured out, okay, well, we can't do that. You can't just ignore things. Now, like I mentioned, I think on a very recent episode, there's a lot of research around suggesting that the carbon dioxide levels inside of a cavity, inside of a tree, get to a level that might actually be killing off the varroa mites over the winter, which is why a lot of colonies are overwintering, as unmanaged colonies, which is kind of a neat thing. But the Langstroth hive is not really doing that today in most scenarios, in most cases. So unless you're doing some kind of a special setup like that, if you decide I'm not going to treat, I'm just going to go, if all natural to you means I'm not doing anything, then your bees are going to die. Your neighbors' bees and bees around you are going to suffer. It's going to make their jobs harder because bees are going to be sharing mites as they interact with each other, particularly drones. Drones are very prone to the mites, and drones will drift from colony to colony, and they will be happy to share their mites with other colonies. Now, if your approach on that is, I don't treat with the conventional treatment methods, but I've come up with a special formula, there's something I made, there's research being done around some herbal approaches, and I went into my spice drawer and I took out a combination of ginger, allspice, oregano, mixed that with a little bit of thyme and put it into this thing, and I put a few drops in the hive, and I haven't had mites since then. Amen. Like, I'm all for it. Let us know. Share that information with us. But if you're a new beekeeper and you have no idea what's going on, or you're an experienced beekeeper and you have no idea what's going on, you have to have a plan. Figure out what you want to do. I can't stress this enough. It is without a doubt the most impactful decision you can have in your apiary. If you said to me, I am thinking about going with just 5-frame nucs and just stack them vertically 7 or 8 high, I think it's really cool. Okay. Bees probably don't need to go quite that high in the space, and you're definitely going to pull some honey off for yourself and rearrange things periodically. But hey, it's easier to manage, easier to lift. Have at it. If that's what works for you and that's what you like, go ahead. But this is one where whenever you say to me, I'm not treating, I tune out, man. You lost me, because that is just so incredibly challenging. Now, as you're thinking about treatment methods, what I would say to you is I would personally divide them into kind of 2 categories, and there are some that have a little bit of overlap, but you have like your gentle treatment options, and then you have your more aggressive treatment options. I have 2 of them that I've kind of used now. It used to be 3. I used Apivar for a while, and I had good results with Apivar, and I liked it, and it was effective. Unfortunately, the underlying ingredient in Apivar is amitraz, and there has been some known amitraz resistance in honeybees discovered over the past couple of years, and that has been a big contributing factor to a lot of the colony loss we've seen throughout the U.S. in like the past 2 winters now. I have had people that I know who are still using Apivar successfully, and it's working fine for them. So I don't know what other people are seeing. I can't speak to everybody else. I have no reservations about continuing to use it. I just don't have any, and I've kind of gone with a little bit of a different approach. So now what I'm doing is 90+% of the time, it's just oxalic acid. I have a vaporizer. It's really easy. You can do them over and over again for pennies on the dollar, and it's a great way to go. It's very gentle, and it's effective. Now, the challenge is, it's effective if your mite numbers are low. If you have a really big infestation, it is not good at the big knockdown, because you've got to knock them down before you can get to a good baseline. So formic acid, formic pro, formic whatever you might use in that category is a bit more aggressive. You really have to follow the directions on those. Whatever those temperature thresholds are, you need to stay in those. If it gets outside of them, just weird things happen. Queens die, queens stop laying for weeks on end. Like, it can be really, really disruptive sometimes when you follow it as prescribed, not because you did something wrong, but because the conditions changed a little bit, or the colony was in the right sized box per prescribed, but the utilization inside the box might have been less. It's just a harsher, more aggressive treatment. But you still have to have something like that in the toolbox, because when something gets really bad, you've got to knock them down. The way that I look at that is, if you don't do something aggressive, they're going to die no matter what. In that scenario, you get mite counts where you're pulling 20, 25, 30, 40 mites in a mite wash. So if you're getting like 40, 50, 60 of them, that's going to put you in that like 15, 20 per 100 range. You get into those higher numbers like that, the colony is not going to be able to sustain itself. But the worst part about it is, even if they do sustain themselves through the spring and into the summer, the viral load of those bees is going to be incredibly high going into the fall. They won't successfully overwinter. If they do, and you see them in the spring, They're going to be black and shiny, have deformed wings. They're going to be doing the kicking chicken little twitch every now and then, if they're still moving at all. It's just not fun. This is just something that you're going to get so sick of. You're going to be like, Jeff, I like you. I think you're a swell guy, but dude, you got to stop talking about the varroa mite. I can't. I got to do that. All right. The final thing I'm going to talk about, and again, I did touch on it a little bit earlier about some of the mindset and getting yourself mentally prepared and being nice and cool and calm and all of that. But there's another kind of emotional component to things that I want you to be prepared for. Beekeeping is really cool. Like, I really, really get geeked out about it. I have a lot of fun with it. The most amazing thing to me that I just absolutely love, warms my heart, is when I have beekeepers who come into our Discord room, or when I have people who email me. Like, I would love to just list all the names of all the amazing people that I've met over the years, and it's just been such a blessing to me. But I love it when somebody reaches out and they're like, hey, I really have no idea what I'm doing. I'm having a hard time. I'm struggling with this. And then I have some level of communication, and then sometimes it's 3 months later, sometimes it's a year or two later. But I get these messages where someone says, hey, I was doing what you told me to do here, and this worked out. I've now got 10 colonies, and I get so excited when I hear how successful that all of you are. But with that, I will give an example. I'm not going to do any names, but there is a gal up in Michigan, and she's been religiously following, listening to the podcast, doing all kinds of her own research and doing things. And she went into the first winter and she ended up losing her bees. And then she had her second winter and she ended up losing her bees. And I know she's passionate about it. I know she's a passionate outdoors person and she loves her bees. But, second year, same problem. And I know we've talked to her a little bit this spring. And I think that I think maybe all, or at least 2 out of 3 or something like that, of her colonies are successfully overwintering this year. And it's great to see that excitement from her and to see the fun that she's having with it. It can be really demoralizing. It can be painful. It can be sad. There are going to be things that you're going to see and happen to your bees, and you're going to be really upset about it. But that's really just kind of the nature of anything dealing with animal husbandry and agriculture. The thrill of victory, the agony of defeat. There are things that are going to happen that are going to really upset you. There are things that are going to happen that are going to have you absolutely thrilled. It is a very bipolar kind of hobby or undertaking or activity. But I think that what I've found, or at least for me, recognizing that you aren't going to figure it out in 1 year. It's so much. There's so many moving parts. You're not going to figure it all out in 1 year. But take the wins where you get them. And what I mean is, let's say that you have day one, you have some packages that show up. Like, that's going to be a little scary. You're going to have this package of bees. The first scary part is dealing with the Postal Service because they're scared to death. That's where you got to walk in and you have 2 approaches you can do. You walk in with no gear and you kind of look a little bit angry, like you're getting ready to go into a football game or something. You're like, yeah, I'm here to get my bees. You look all tough and they're like, oh, and you're like, yeah, that's right. I'm here to get them. I'm taking them home. You can go tough guy approach, or the fun approach you can do is literally cover yourself head to toe with protective gear. I'm talking everything, like wear boots and don't have anything exposed, and go in and be like, yeah, I'm here to get the bees, and just try to be as scared as you can. Like, whenever you get near the packages, just to be like, I don't know. That's, again, have fun in the ways that you like to have fun. But what I want you to do is, when you get those packages home and it's time to do that install, that's an accomplishment. It's a big deal. At least to me it is. It's a big deal because you've taken this colony that has been shipped to you via mail, and you have found the way to establish a home for them, get them installed into their new home, and they're operational. They're now living in your yard. That's a win. And then when you go back, say 3 or 4 days later, and you peek inside to see if that queen has been released from the cage, that's a win. You come back at the end of week 1 and you're just going to do a quick look in there to see if they are drawing comb, maybe refill your feeder. Well, definitely refill your feeder, probably. Probably. Refill your feeder, looking for drawn comb, looking for eggs. Hey, I saw eggs today. And this is really a great time to see your queen, because the queen is going to be much more difficult to find for a new beekeeper as the colony gets larger and larger. But look near where you see those eggs. Whatever frame has the eggs on it, she's probably pretty close by. But again, take the wins. And if you're a person who actually likes to journal, or if you like to take, voice notes or whatever, talk about that stuff, write about that stuff. Say, hey, I had a great day at the NB yard. I did an inspection, I saw this, I saw that. Remember those things and enjoy them because they are fun. Then as time goes by, you're going to start to see the things that aren't as fun, and you're going to start dealing with those and finding ways to deal with those. I always tell you, you know, we have a lot going on. There's a lot going on all the time, and the fact that I'm, you know, like all ADHD and all over the place doesn't make it any better. But we have a lot of bright people in our Discord room who love to chat about bees, who love to help out. If you're not a chatty person, you don't really want to get in there, you can always just lurk. I would say 90% of people are lurking. They just hang out and listen. They don't talk. That's fine. You want to email me? That's fine. But there are resources out there, and you can reach out and you can ask questions. You know, you're not alone here. It's tough. It's a challenging hobby. It is going to stress you out a little bit. But again, take the wins. Have fun. Try to have fun. And another thing as I wrap up here, because I'm going to start rambling more than I already am. One thing that I love to do, and this is the first time I've had bees back at the house for a little while, for those of you who really don't know me or the whole story, I had lots of bees for a long time, and then I was supposed to have some here last year, and I needed to be with my daughter to get her across the country for some work she was doing out in Wyoming with the Department of Forestry, and they had to reschedule my delivery because of some bad spring weather with the bees I was going to be receiving last year to kind of restart things at my house. So I had to cancel. And I thought, well, that's okay. I'll get the swarm traps up. Well, I got the swarm traps up a little late, didn't catch any swarms, and I was beeless last year, which was really mentally disruptive for me. But what I love to do, and when you're thinking about where you want to put your hives this year, keep this in mind. If you're kind of a coffee drinker or a hot tea drinker or whatever, if you like to go out in the morning, I really, really enjoy taking a little chair and going out. And I used to have a nice horseshoe, which was really cool. It was a horseshoe setup of bees, so I could walk into the middle of the horseshoe and kind of do inspections. Like if it were a clock, I can walk towards the 12 o'clock and do my inspections from 9 to 3 or 3 to 9, whichever way I wanted to work. Everything was right there near each other. I could grab parts and pieces and exchange things if I needed to. But I would just put my chair in the middle of that and just drink my coffee in the morning, look around, enjoy the bees, come back inside, fill the cup up. And then, you know, by the time I finish with that second cup, then it's time to start the day. But that was like my therapy, just sitting there and listening to the buzz of the bees and watching them come in and watching them work. It is a very therapeutic thing. So if you recognize that there is a high probability that you're going to lose your bees this year as a first-year beekeeper, that things go wrong, things happen, don't think about the negative. Don't focus on the negative. Remember all the wins that you take and take that joy. Take those moments and drink that coffee or drink that tea or drink your water, whatever it is. Take that time. And if you're a busy person, you've got a full-time job, busy life or whatever, okay, do 15 minutes. Just take 15 minutes every day and sit down with your bees, take a deep breath. And at least if something doesn't work out, you've had an amazing opportunity to engage with them on a way that most people never do. And you'll learn some skills that you can then reapply when you try again next year. So don't beat yourself up when things don't go the way you want them to go. All right, I'm going to wrap this up because I love to talk, as you guys know, and I'll just keep going. But I want you guys to remember, this is kind of a multi-part series we're doing to kind of get everybody ready. We have Choosing Your Hive Setup is coming up next. We're going to do both of these this week, so this should be you should be hearing this on Monday. Thursday is going to be getting your hive setup chosen. I may still sneak a bee buzz in this Wednesday. I periodically will try to re-gauge bee buzz interest because it's one of those things where some people love it and some kind of don't. I used to do a lot of personal updates in there as well. I've cut that out completely. It's just Q&A. But I did put a survey on Spotify for the last Bee Buzz episode. I think it was 190. You can just go and take that survey if you're interested in, letting me know what you think about those. I may sneak a Bee Buzz in this week. It should be the last one for the big round of questions that I had. Not sure if that's going to happen though. But Choosing Your Hive Setup will be out this week, and then we have All About Frames. We have feeding systems, installing the bees, swarm prevention basics. There's a lot more, and all of these are coming in the next few weeks here. And again, don't forget, check us out, youtube.com/@beekeeping for newbies. I have a playlist on there called Newbees Start Here. So if you're brand new or just trying to get a refresher as a first or second year returning beekeeper, go check out that playlist, get a couple tips and pointers. And if you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. Take care, be kind to one another. Remember that I love you. There's nothing you can do about it. We'll talk to you soon.